Julian kills Odo, kinda. The intendant likes hot jumja tea, and Garrick does admire a well-tailored gown in any universe. Everybody, and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton.
Hello, hello.
We're also joined by very special guest, Miss Malissa Longo.
Hello.
I'm, was that a D sharp? And my name is Ryan T. Husk, and today we are doing a cool and awesome review of Deep Space Nine Season 2, Episode 23, Crossover, directed by David Livingston, and it's the first Mirror Universe episode in Deep Space Nine. So awesome. Let's get into it. How you guys doing?
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're like, we're good. Good episode.
Yeah, well, you know. It was a pretty good episode.
Right.
I liked it.
Yeah, I liked it too.
Awesome.
So we got the evil Kira in it, which was great.
Yeah.
I do want to do a quick shout out to start us off to our friend Dr. Marie Segal, who seems to always be very active in our live videos, in our posts. She's sharing things. She's really making us look bad because she does more work than we do, which is awesome. So we just want to, she knows everything about medicine and stuff out in New York at a time where they need to know about medicine out in New York.
Yeah.
So shout out to her and all of New York, but especially her. Anyway.
Yeah.
First impressions, guys?
Well, it started off really like, oh God, here we go with another Bashir awkward episode. That's like, oh no, please don't be this, because this is going to be a long hour or 49 minutes or whatever.
Yeah.
But it actually turned pleasantly surprising, right after the opening scene, which was setting them up. But his like him trying to make a girl laugh or entertain her is the most awkward thing to watch, right? His character.
So funny though.
Yeah.
Melissa, did you feel more entertained, amused, or awkward when you were watching that scene?
Awkward and amused. For awkward for Bashir and awkward for Kira because she, wants to meditate and Bashir doesn't get the hint.
And then it's especially funny when he's like, "Oh, we should have dinner sometime." Like, and she's like, "I think you should focus on Dax." She's like, "Oh, right. No, I didn't mean like that." She's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I mean, if I were to be mean,
yeah,
take a break."
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I liked when he said, "I'm glad we're doing this," and she's like, "What? Like,
what are we doing?
Like doing what? Like, don't try to make something out of this." And then he goes into the awkward, like breathing stuff. It reminds me of my friend who always gets super nervous when a girl's around. He like puts his foot in his mouth and he just starts saying and doing stuff that is so ridiculous. You're just like, come on, let me get him out of here before.
Yeah.
Let me save you, bro. Come on, let's go, man. It's time to go. Let me try to save you.
Yeah, he's definitely one that doesn't get a hint very well. You can't be subtle with him.
Plus, Kira's not one that's like tough to read. You know what I mean? Like she's
right.
Pretty clearly not interested. Like Dax kind of throws him a bone here or there to where you can forgive him if he's unsure or thinks they're mixed signals or thinks maybe he's got a chance. But Kira doesn't give off that vibe at all.
She's pretty clear in what she wants to do and
not want.
Wants to do.
I liked when he was like, "My name's Julian. Go on, say it, Julian."
And she's like, "Julian."
Like, all right, like say my name. Like, all right.
Say my name. That's like Breaking Bad when he's like, "You know who I am. Say my name."
Yeah.
Yeah. It was awkward moment after awkward. I couldn't wait to get out of the runabout.
There was one good thing that came out of it, though, was that one tiny little snippet at the very beginning where they say they're returning to Deep Space Nine, or they called home, after opening New Bajor, which is the first Bajoran colony in the Gamma Quadrant. So I thought that was really interesting. A little snippet
Seed.
to where, yeah, right. So now we know that there is a new Bajoran colony in the Gamma Quadrant. I mean, personally, I wouldn't want to live in the first Bajoran colony.
It didn't look that good, whatever they showed us in this episode. But there was like some awkward stuff that I noticed too. Did you notice the camera angles like that were coming up from underneath?
In the beginning?
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed the camera angles, and I think that added to the awkwardness of the scene. I was thinking of that too, because they're in this really tight, space.
Yeah.
And she's got nowhere to go to get away from him, and he's just, Yeah.
So they played it really close on them, so it was like almost like she was like the camera was here on her,
right?
Yes.
And it was just like, okay, yeah, all right, we're entering into something. Let's focus on something else right now.
Yeah.
And then later on, they kind of did these angles from up underneath. I don't know what the intention was behind that, and maybe it's like a mirror universe thing. That's why I was kind of bringing it up.
I didn't notice it, but a lot of times if they're bringing up a camera angle from underneath, it's because they're trying to make somebody seem bigger or more intimidating, which would fit with this scene. If we see Garrick and we're like, oh, it's Happy Garrick and we like him, but they want to make him seem a little bit more ominous or intimidating, or Odo or something, show him from the down, the angle down looking up at them, and it just feels like a different type of character, and same thing with lighting, so maybe that's
I would like a little bit background before we get too far into it about Mirror Universe and what the origin. She mentioned Kirk, and what's that about?
What she mentioned was the first that we know about it as viewers as well. There was like a transporter accident, and Kirk and a couple others go over into the Mirror Universe. That's why you see Spock with the goatee. If you've ever seen that, that shows us that he's Mirror Universe Spock. He's tough because he's got a goatee. Mm-hmm. And basically the Terrans, are the bad guys, or kind of, everybody's a lot harder in the Mirror Universe. And when Kirk leaves Spock, he gives him like words of wisdom, and he says, you could be good, or whatever the hell he says. I haven't seen it in a long time. Melissa might remember better than I.
No, I have not seen that episode, and I was actually going to watch it because they reference it. But
also, a really good continuation of that episode was done by Star Trek Continues. Star Trek Continues picked up where that episode left off, but in the Mirror Universe. So, we're following the regular universe where Kirk comes back, and they did an episode right after Kirk leaves, what happened afterwards. And I had the pleasure of acting in that episode, which was a lot of fun. Really cool. So check that out. I believe it's episode 3 of Star Trek Continues. Anyway, so when Kirk leaves, he gives Spock some words of wisdom. And Kira says those words of wisdom changed Spock and made him start to be good rather than evil Spock. But what was really cool, at least to me, was that they said this new alliance has been formed between the Cardassians and the Klingons. And that's a cool alliance, except that it seemed like the Klingons were all the subordinates. Like, it didn't seem more so much as an alliance as more just that the Cardassians have taken over the Klingons, and the Klingons are like, they're goons, they're tough guys,
Yeah, the muscle.
Right.
Yeah, I wasn't convinced on the explanation on how she as a Bajoran was the leader of it. She mentioned that they let them in on a kind of like a pact or an agreement, right? So they kind of included them. But I just it just felt like, if you were the least person on the totem pole, that you wouldn't be the most likely to be the leader. That's all.
Especially in that tough universe.
Right.
I felt the same way, and I thought maybe I misheard something, and maybe I interpreted it wrong. But it seemed like Bajor just got brought in recently, yet somehow this person from this newly added thing was the big boss. Maybe Melissa, did you catch something we missed?
Well, I didn't see it as strange. For me, it was like the Cardassians and the Klingons had formed an alliance, is what it's called. And the Bajorans came in on that alliance, not as a subordinate, but like the Terrans are, but as equals to the Cardassians and the Klingons. Mm-hmm. So I didn't see it as, oh, they're less than us. I think the Bajorans are probably harder in this universe as well as other people. So it's not as strange to me, and especially with the station orbiting Bajor. So
right, that's a good point about Bajor.
Not as strange.
One other element in the Mirror Universe is it's a very, very dog-eat-dog world, and you see that in original series. You see that in Enterprise very strongly in their Mirror Universe episode. Really good one. But basically, it's like if you're the toughest or the most sinister, you climb to the top by killing your predecessors, kind of thing, right? So in that case, it almost seems like it doesn't really matter what race you are. If you kill your boss and you take over, you're the boss, kind of like what Garrick was planning to do with the Independent. So maybe she moved up just from the sheer badassery that is Kira.
Well, yeah, that and she seduced everyone.
That's true.
To get to where she is, because she was very charming.
She was charming, and she had everyone terrified of her on that station. So that was really good. I really loved the outfit she came out with, that all silver piece with the kind of the hair piece. Mm-hmm. I really liked that whole outfit, and I think that she was really sexy in it. So shout out to Anna for pulling that off and making it look so damn good.
Speaking of that, how cool was it that she completely redefined her character? In that she, same thing with Odo, same thing with Garrick, same thing with Miles. They totally redefined their characters in a different kind of light, but I feel like hers was the furthest from the original character, right?
I agree, and I noticed that right off the bat. Whether she had the headpiece on or not, I could tell who was the mirror Kira and who wasn't, and that's a huge shout out to Nana for great work, because Kira, our Kira, is a totally different Kira than Mirror Kira.
And shout out to the meowing kitty too.
Yeah.
She wants to be let in. She does. She does. But yeah, I noticed that.
I have to say that I think Sisko was dead on too, as far as making a real flip. He was a real different version of himself.
Yeah.
And I like seeing him in this more relaxed state, really laughing a lot.
He was a pirate.
And sinister. Yeah, that's what I wrote down.
He was a pirate.
He was. And he was holding that big gun, and that gun looked like, like a long barrel 44 or something. It was like old school. I mean, those old cop shows with like Hunter or something.
Oh, yeah. I remember Hunter.
Remember Hunter?
Hunter with just that big old gun, man.
Yeah. See,
who was that actor? I don't remember the actor, though.
I forgot, but Hunter, that's the name of the show. We used to watch.
Looks like
a show.
Michael something.
I forgot his name.
Anyway,
but he was it was a great show, and he used to carry that long big barrel like this. So that's kind of what it reminded me of.
Right.
Yeah.
A little bit more about Sisko, because you're right. I forgot to mention him as one that kind of redefined his character, because I was thinking about the people that were more stationed on Terroc Nor. By the way, it was still called Terroc Nor, which is cool.
Right.
But Sisko had like practically the opposite kind of life, where in our universe, Sisko is very by the book. He enforces the law. He's always keeping everything, by the letter for the most part. And in this thing, he's just a rebel. He's a pirate. He's out taking care of number one, living his life, having fun, joking, manipulating, killing, just, and it's Cirroc.
Yeah,
Cool to see. Yeah.
It was really cool to see. The other thing that I thought was interesting was most of the characters were like a more evil version of themselves, or an evil version of themselves. But except for, in my opinion, Quark.
Right.
Quark actually seemed nicer.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's because
that's
the dichotomy there.
That's
right.
Okay. Yeah. So I was like, who is this guy? Get him out of here. He's not tough enough to be this.
So what about if we see Mirror Julian and he's like nice to women?
Oh yeah.
Like not creepy at all. Like he's the guy that women trust,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he's. It's funny because my sister sometimes watches me watching the shows, and she'll come in and throw her 2 cents in, and usually it's about how Julian is the most handsomest guy on our show. And she likes to throw that in. Oh, he's the most handsome guy. And
just
so
because he has a British accent, because I know that works. I know that's
he's a handsome guy, and
he's a handsome guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it's funny that doesn't play really in his favor as far as being good with women in this show.
Well, I love that though. I love that just because you're good looking doesn't mean you're great with who you're trying to attract.
Yeah. And usually somebody who is kind of like shy or kind of goofy is not a player, right? And he's clearly not a player. He just he's a flirt, but he's not a player.
Right.
He's he tried to be a player, but he just didn't quite make the team, I think.
Yeah,
he's not a player.
He's not even on the JV team.
No. I don't think it's in him. No.
Yeah. Well, we know, no spoilers, but we know he gets a little better as time goes on.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit more about, we didn't see Dax, for example. So that's one of those things, and we didn't see Mirror Universe Julian. So that's one of those things where we know if and when they go back, it's just kind of like a stay tuned, find out what those guys are like, because we know eventually we're going to see them all,
Right.
Yeah. The other thing is the other person who was a softer version was O'Brien, who's always a complaining, hard, tough character. And so in this one, he's really soft and kind of like, not as opinionated as he normally is, right?
Yeah. Well, and I love that about this episode is that everyone's playing themselves, but they're different selves. So I think it does really well in creating new character and letting you invest in those characters, even though we've just met them. So, and I think that Deep Space Nine does really great at creating character and relationship. Right. And I think they continued it in this episode. I think they did it very well.
It's a great point. The more defined your characters are, the more the stark contrast is noticeable when you change that character.
Mm-hmm. And you have to play the truth of the characters leading up to the episode for us to notice, oh, well, Kira doesn't act like that, or that's not Miles, the Miles that I know. So, it's very good, in my opinion.
Which character out of these Mirror Universe would you actually like better than the original? Or is there one?
I mean, for me, like, obviously, Quark is a nicer guy, but we don't necessarily like him because he's a nice guy. We like him because he's not a nice guy. I'm always pretty partial to Garrick myself. He was always my favorite, or one of my favorite characters from the very beginning. So it's nice to see him not be an outcast, not be a loser or, you know, or rejected, or just a simple tailor that's just trying to have a friend, you know what I mean? But to actually see him in a position of power is a stark change and a stark difference. You know, now he's not just hiding in the corner, but he can just be himself, and we can picture him in a completely different light. So his position is probably the most different. Him and Sisko have the most different positions, not necessarily character attributes, but their position in life, you know?
Yeah.
Melissa says, Kira all the way, right?
What? No, I mean,
pretty good character though.
No, I like the Intendant. I like that she is complex and that she doesn't play, oh, I'm evil all the time, blah blah blah.
Not at all. Yeah,
she's playful and seductive and charming, and you don't want to see her get angry, which is what everyone is trying to avoid because she's obviously got a temper. So
I'm in a good mood today.
Right. Play something light. I'm in a happy mood.
Yeah.
You know, when you said that, it just made me think of something that I hadn't thought of when I watched it. And we should ask Nana this one of these days. She almost played it a little bit like Ducat.
That's the thought that came into my head. And it was like, she's kind of Gul Dukat in this episode.
Which is an amazing writer's tool of saying like, hey, somebody you hate, you never know in their position, you might be, you know, in the same kind of personality frame of mind, you know? Right.
Well, I thought that was interesting how the tables had turned, and now she's the oppressor and the intendant is the oppressor, and Kira knows what it's like to be oppressed. So it's
there's also like an infatuation she has with herself that I like in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like she looks at Kira and she's like, oh, you're so beautiful.
She's like this attractive lady.
Yeah. And I like the way she's like, oh, you're trying to get in my head. Like, you know me. Like, you know how to do that to me. And there was moments that I really liked, and I think it's not easy to do when you're playing both sides of the character, right? Because she's literally flirting with herself on two different takes, and I just think that was really a great performance on her part. But going back to what you said about Ducat, I kind of felt like Garrick was more like a Ducat in this episode.
I definitely did notice that. I noticed that from the beginning. Absolutely. That he was delivering his lines a little bit more like Ducat and other Cardassians have delivered them. And I wonder if he watched them and kind of mirrored them, or if he just kind of just said, okay, well, here's Garrick, and what would evil Garrick be like? But we're going to take a quick break, and we'll talk about that in just a second. And we'll also talk about the trivioids that didn't make the cutting room floor, including the one that I was trying really hard to put in the top 3, but I finally gave up on.
I have a guess on that too. So when we come back, I can give you my best guess.
We'll start with the guess. Yes, I love that. Because usually your guesses are better than the ones I did.
I've got one guess. I know. I wrote it down here.
All right. So we'll take like a half a second break, and we'll be right back with the